You give me no alternative than to suspend your licence for 3 months.
Some people choose public transport, while others, like Lisa, have no choice. I'm Christy Sharp, and it's my job to find out how young people see the future of public transport. Let's go and see how Lisa handles 3 months without her wheels.
Coming up next, Maureen Hayes, Brisbane City Council Transport Chairperson, talks to us about the youth car culture.
I used to be a secondary school teacher, and one of the rites of passage of young people, one of the most important things to them, I used to hear, was getting their car licence. So it really shows how important cars, car driving and car culture is to young people. And if we as public transport planners don't understand that, then we'll never get anywhere. But because of the importance of the car, and because Australians are in love with their cars, it makes my job of getting people on public transport all that more difficult.
Public transport is a very important part of Queensland. It affects where we go, what we do, and what our future will be like.
What would life be like without public transport? Tens of thousands of students would have difficulty getting to school or university each day. Many commuters would leave home hours earlier to get to work on time and would have difficulty finding parking spaces. To provide more parking stations, many natural areas would have to be bulldozed. To get from one side of the river to the other, we would drive all the way around, rather than just hopping on a ferry. Traffic would be an absolute chaos, with congestion and damaging effects of air pollution out of control.
How would those without cars get around? Life would be very difficult and very different.
To meet the future transport needs of the community and to safeguard our environment, it is essential that public transport is widely used. It is also important that this transport system provides a reliable, convenient and cost-effective alternative to private car use.
The future of public transport is in the hands of our secondary school students and those who are beginning their tertiary studies.
There is now a great opportunity to look at public transport through the eyes of those that will nurture its design. Lisa is talking with senior students at Glenalla
Do you
High.
prefer to use public or private transport? The uni that I'm hoping to get into is all the way in Ipswich, so it'd be a real hassle. I'd have to get the bus and get the train, then get another bus from there to wherever it is that I'm going. So it'd be much easier just grabbing, a car and just driving there.
I would go by public transport because I would take day classes and then I don't have to pay for parking.
I think it's not really that important at the moment. I can catch public transport or my mum will drive me wherever I want to go, so it's not really that much of an issue in my life at the moment.
Well, I find the public transport to be easier with major places like the city and Indooroopilly and big shopping centres like that. But then if you want to go to smaller places, like you say Stones Corner, that's a really good shopping place. But then you have to get off at the Mater Hospital and then catch a taxi or something to get there. So I'd rather go by private to places like that.
Do you feel safe on public transport? Catching public transport is, good because it's cheap and but that's only getting to big shopping centres. But I would catch more public transport if it was safer because winter the sun goes down earlier, around about 5 or 4, and that limits me catching transport because I'm scared to catch it after dark.
As Naomi said, you could be by yourself on a bus or a carriage and a train, and you could be robbed or who knows what else would happen to you, and your parents get worried as well.
Has anyone used the City Cat?
I've only been there once, and that's just for, because we'd never been on it, so we went just to try it out, just to go up and down the river. But I don't think very many of us would use it to actually get somewhere.
Yeah, it takes too long.
No way.
It does.
No way.
It does not. Like, go to New Farm, it takes you like half an hour.
That's because we got the wrong one.
Are your transport needs driven by work or leisure?
When I'm going to work, say for example, I might get dropped off at work by my parents, but then if they're not available to pick me up after I finish, I might catch one of the buses back home sort of thing.
But I would rather much have a car than have to go on public transport, but I don't see me getting a car, so I guess I'm stuck with public transport.
Buy you one.
Yeah, sometimes if the car's not available, like last week the car was in for repairs, so I had to use the bus to get to work. I don't know, either one's got its advantages and disadvantages.
Queensland Transport and the Queensland Police Service have jointly developed a speed management strategy in consultation with automobile associations, local governments and other key industry and community groups. This strategy is a comprehensive package incorporating road engineering, public education and police enforcement initiatives. It includes a statewide review of existing speed limits, public education about the dangers of excessive or inappropriate speed, a better system for distributing police resources across the state, and improved enforcement technology.
As drivers, pedestrians and cyclists, we all have the right to use the roads. We also have the responsibility to use them safely and legally. I spoke to Superintendent Graham Pittman from the State Traffic Support Branch and asked him what the most significant changes were to traffic management over the last decade.
Probably the largest increase we've seen in traffic management here in Queensland is traffic speed management enforcement, where we are targeting speeding offences, and that's probably been the biggest significant increase in the last couple of years. And also prior to that was drink driving, where random breath testing has increased dramatically in terms of the number of people who are tested annually.
Are youth a contributing factor to alcohol and speeding offences?
Probably over the last 10 years, young people from the age of 17 through to about 30 have made up the major group of people who have not only lost their lives and been injured, but also been picked up by police for speeding and drink driving, but also not wearing seatbelts. So we're keen to see young people enjoy life and not get involved in crashes, which cause injury to themselves, but also affect their families and their friends' lives also.
Are road fatalities among young people still high?
It has decreased in the last 2 years, but it's still higher than what we'd like to see. The young people are certainly representative of the major crashes, and certainly some of the issues that we're trying to address is how do you influence them in terms of behaviour on the road, also looking at how do we influence their peer group to realise that there's a responsibility for people using the road. But I think most of all getting to realise that the roads are a place where we need to travel safely, and we certainly don't want any antisocial behaviour in terms of how cars are used and how we actually may impact on other road users.
Is there an issue with safety on public transport?
Certainly there's an issue about the crimes committed on public transport, particularly railways, and also the bus area, the bus transportation. That has probably been true to a degree in the last decade, but probably in the last 2 or 3 years there's been a significant increase in technology and surveillance, and also the human intervention into crimes in public transports. By that I mean there are security cameras now available, there are communications on railway stations and near bus depots now to contact people to seek assistance. The lighting has improved dramatically in some of these areas. The facilities are more open so the public can see what's going on in these areas. And the Queensland Police and the other government agencies now provide security personnel who can intervene in any sort of behavioural problems on public transports. So I think to a large degree that's improved dramatically, particularly in about the last 5 years.
Are there any significant road issues related to young people?
I think one issue is we're seeing a significant increase in young people on antisocial behaviour, speeding, in other words drag racing. I don't know if you've looked at anything on drag racing, but that's coming through more and more, and they've got internet sites now. The young people actually set up, and we have them from the Gold Coast through to here, anything up to 500 to 600 of them attend drag races, which they set up on public highways. And the other problem is that if something goes wrong, they meet an untimely death at a young age of 18 through to 20, and that what they need to be aware of is that that affects their families, their loved ones, their girlfriend, it affects their friends at school, and no one likes to see a life that's so promising wasted on a race that really is only a few minutes in your life and can have consequences for the rest of your life.
Transport played a pivotal role in the early history of Australia. The problems associated with establishing an efficient system of transporting people and merchandise within this vast continent were many. The first century of transport relied heavily on imported technology and systems that were quickly adapted to local conditions. With each new technological development in transport came new social changes that directly impacted on where people lived, how towns were planned, and how they prospered. In the beginning, the construction of bridges enabled roads and railways to reach the arid inland and served as lifelines to new settlements. The advent of mass unrestricted movement with the introduction of motor cars completely changed the living and recreational patterns of the population, encouraging urban sprawl. It was from Ipswich on the 31st of July 1865 that Queensland's first railway line was completed to a small town now known as Grantchester, 38 kilometres further west. Within 2 years, the line had been extended to Toowoomba, capital of the rich Darling Downs. Queensland Rail, running a 3'6" narrow gauge line, is easily by far the largest rail network in Australia. It stretches more than 10,000 kilometres throughout the state and carries just over 40% of all rail freight within Australia. Not only does rail provide a significant freight and public transport system, it also contributes immensely to the local job market through the manufacture of new rolling stock, including the tilt train that was built in the regional city of Maryborough. Ipswich workshops provided the centre for rail construction and maintenance for 130 years. By 1950, they had built more than 200 steam locomotives. Even when steam power was replaced by diesel and diesel by electricity, the workshops continued as the centre of rail maintenance. From the early days, rail has been the focus of public transport. In today's society, this is not necessarily so. A snapshot of Australia's car and public transport use shows that people in New South Wales are the keenest users of public transport, with 18% travelling to work or study by bus or train. Of these, twice as many choose trains over buses. Car ownership in New South Wales is the lowest in Australia, yet the state leads the way in terms of income. Queensland had the worst public transport availability, with 40% of people having no access to trains or buses.
People use private transport as a matter of convenience.
Since the advent of the two-car family, development strategies have not always prioritised public transport. In the early days of regional growth, people became self-dependent and sometimes isolated by lack of competitive transport. By the time suitable public transport is available, the use of private transportation is entrenched. The Queensland Rail City Train network covers Greater Brisbane and southeast Queensland with over 740 average daily weekday train services. These services reach from Gympie to the north of Brisbane to Cleveland in the east. Travelling from the west, the services extend from Ipswich to Robina on the Gold Coast. Each year, this service carries more than 40 million commuters. Train-linked bus connections are provided on the Gold Coast and Sunshine Coast. City Train also operates rail bus services between Eagle Junction and Pinkenbar, Ipswich and Toogoolawah, Rosewood and Helidon, and between Caboolture and Bribie Island.
No one denies that the motorcar can be a comfortable and convenient form of transport around town. Our problem is that some consider we have too much of a good thing, leading to poor air quality and greater traffic congestion. Maureen Hayes is the Transport Chairperson for Brisbane City Council. Let's hear her thoughts on the future of public transport.
The future of public transport is sometimes difficult to think about. There are people who believe that they should be able to drive their cars wherever they want, whenever they want. And that is a problem shared by all large cities in the world, including Brisbane. So the future of public transport is a difficult one. We need to educate people about its necessity, and we need to plan for a future where a greater percentage of people are using buses, trains, ferries, cycles and walking.
I asked Councillor Hayes if the new initiatives are environmentally friendly.
A lot of the initiatives that we've got are based almost solely on environmental friendliness. So that if you look at Brisbane, it's got a real possibility of air pollution. The major source of pollution is car exhaust. We must get people away from simple use of cars. They make that travel decision automatically. Let's get in the car. Environmentally friendly decisions are ones that don't impact on the environment. We have bought 50 natural gas buses. That means that if you can get 70 people on a gas bus, imagine how much you have lessened the pollution in Brisbane. You've got 70 people out of their single occupant vehicle, because everyone drives one person per car, and you've got 70 cars that are major pollutants off the road, and you've replaced them with one non-polluting natural gas vehicle. So environmentally friendly, absolutely. And what can be less threatening than getting on your bike and going to school? We're really trying to make that a safe thing to do. And if people, particularly younger people with the cycle market, decided to bicycle more, I'm sure it'd be better for everyone. We'd have a better exercise regime. It would be absolutely environmentally friendly and a great thing. So when you think about public transport, you don't only think, what can the government do for me? You think yourself, what can you do for the environment? Why don't you try walking, cycling, catch a bus, get on the train? All environmentally friendly.
The river is the heart of Brisbane and provides another alternative for travel around the city. Brisbane Transport operates a range of river transport services designed for the needs of recreational travellers and commuters. Whether commuting up, down or across the river, City Cats, cross-river ferries and inner-city ferries provide an unparalleled level of comfort and convenience.
Would Councillor Hayes, as Transport Chairperson, be involved in the Brisbane Intercity Bypass?
One of the important things we discovered with Brisbane was that heavy freight vehicles and vehicles who only wanted to go from one side of the city to the other were travelling right through the city centre. So that if you stood in Ann Street outside the City Hall, as visitors did, thundering freight would go past them a metre in front of them. The whole of Ann Street was choked constantly with traffic that didn't want to come into the city. They weren't coming in here because they needed to, they were simply passing through the city. So we decided that what we needed was what's called a bypass, and that is that you didn't come through the city, that you built a road just outside the city fringe, and that would take the traffic, particularly freight, out of our city centre, restore it to a proper heart beating, with people walking, with people being able to get around without threat. And we took that very large traffic flow through Victoria Park, underneath the exhibition grounds, and out to Kingsford Smith Drive. That will be a very valuable asset to traffic, to public transport, and to the heart of the city. And could I say, it's been a most successful project, and that road will be finished at least 6 months before we planned initially. So we're very pleased with the Inner City Bypass.
This is obviously a big project.
The Inner City Bypass is the largest project that the Council has ever undertaken. The total cost when it's finished will be $220 million, so it is a large project. That's how important we think it is to be able to get those cars out of the city, to get them from the end of Hale Street, which currently finishes nowhere, and get them right out onto Kingsford Smith Drive, under 2 tunnels, crossing over large roads with no traffic lights, with no stopping, and therefore it will be a great through route for freight, we think is a major step forward.
Just recently I've taken up bike riding again. This can be dangerous on main roads. What plans does Council have for bike riding?
Bike riding is fascinating. I've recently taken up bike riding again. I used to ride my bike to school. Very few people do now. But there is a danger on major roads, and it's very difficult for the Council to deal with that. That's a cultural thing. Many car drivers believe that cyclists have no right to roads at all. You'll know from your parents' attitude or your own. People say, oh, look at that stupid bike rider, oh, why don't they get off the road? So that cultural difficulty is impossible for the Council to deal with. That's people's personal behaviour. And I think that a lot of public transport decision making and a lot of the future of public transport and how we travel comes down to that single personal decision that people make as they leave the house. How are they going to travel? So it's no good everyone saying to the Council, why don't you do something about it? I'd like to say to the public, why don't you do something about it? Why don't you investigate what's the best way for the society to get around? If young people all rode cycles, as they do in many European cities, if people walked more, if people chose a bit of disadvantage and went by bus, we'd all be immensely better off. So I think that there is a tendency, I've seen it all the time, for people, when there's an accident, they approach me, television cameras and so on, and say, and what are you going to do about it? But I say, what are other people going to do about it? Are they going to drive more carefully? Are they going to use public transport more? Are they going to safely cycle? Are they going to walk? That decision is finally up to you.
South East Queensland is currently experiencing the highest rate of population growth in Australia.
This growth will also occur in the transport sector. Managing this growth in a manner that will maintain the livability of the region will be a major challenge for governments, the business sector and the community. The Integrated Regional Transport Plan is a 25-year plan that will shape South East Queensland's transport system. It aims to shift the emphasis of transport planning from moving vehicles to moving people and goods.
An objective of the Integrated Ticketing Project is to help make public transport the first choice.
It will also reduce road congestion and air pollution, byproducts of car dependency. The introduction of integrated ticketing will encourage new public transport users to the system and help existing users to transfer between services and modes more easily with added cost efficiency. A smart card can be used for a variety of trips on any mode of public transport. Integrated ticketing will be initially introduced in the area bounded by Noosa, Coolangatta and Helidon between 2001 and 2003. But this is only one near-term solution. There are others. AirTrain links Brisbane's international and domestic airport terminals with Brisbane CBD and the Gold Coast. AirTrain offers a safe, fast, convenient and low-cost alternative means of airport transfer, bringing Brisbane into line with the world's most advanced airports. Brisbane and southeast Queensland are no strangers to high-speed rail. The technologically advanced Tilt train serves the outer Brisbane environs and regional towns through to Rockhampton. Australia's fastest train is also the fastest narrow-gauge train in the world, capable of speeds up to 210 kilometres per hour.
So where do we go from here?
No one denies that a geographically large city like Brisbane may have difficulty servicing its outlying areas. Many people continue to commute daily to the CBD, and to do that they require transport, public or private. Do we encourage the general population to move closer to the city, or encourage industry to establish workplaces in outlying areas? Is our future to be determined by an economy that condenses living to the high-rise, forsaking the backyard for density living? Will we go on servicing the city sprawl, accepting a lower standard of transport, continued growth in private motor vehicle usage, and the inevitable pollution?
Does youth have the answer? Like Lisa, students seem to have a pretty strong grip on transport issues.
After all, many of them drive cars. They all travel the city, and many of the recreational activities they seek are a good distance from their home. Lisa looks for answers from her students.
Well, what are the hazards of driving on Brisbane roads? Probably the increase of traffic flow along main arterial roads and highways and freeways. Due to the city growing in population, I guess, it means there's more cars on the road and more hazards to deal with on the road, making it more dangerous, including cyclists on the road and more buses as well, I guess. Just all forms of transport seems to have increased along the major roads in the city.
I believe there are two main hazards of driving on Brisbane roads, and they would include some pedestrians not knowing the rules properly, or some drivers not respecting the pedestrians' rights on the road. And I believe that the other hazard, which is huge on Brisbane roads, is the poor condition of some Brisbane roads with potholes and road surfaces not being very smooth.
I don't hold a strong viewpoint on safety because it's not an issue to me, and I haven't heard much about people having problems on public transport, but I could imagine females travelling alone or late at night on trains especially, probably not so much buses but on trains. But as far as I'm concerned, the commuter car parking I see as a problem. I don't trust leaving my car there. I'd rather walk to one rather than leave my car at a train station for 12 hours a day.
My thoughts on personal safety in public transport. I believe that at the moment there is a high level of personal safety on public transport. The trains do have security guards on them periodically, but I also believe that as the need arises, that needs to be maintained, and it might even need to be introduced onto buses to ensure that passengers' personal safety is respected.
What do I believe integrating public transport to mean? Well, probably along the lines of integrating buses like city council transport with state transport like the trains, and getting them to work together with their timetables. I believe that to be an awesome idea because I don't live near a train station. I'd love to catch trains. If there was consistent bus routes leading to a train station, I would catch trains with a integrated ticket as well, where the ticket would cover both the whole trip from getting on the bus, getting on the train and then the bus back home again. That'd make life a lot easier for me and probably be a lot quicker getting into town by train.
Integrated public transport, when I hear the authorities speak of this, I think integrated public transport means integrating different systems of public transport like buses and trains to ensure that the users can get from their own destinations as quickly as possible by having a smooth transition between different public transport options.
Do I think inner city high density living will resolve public transport and private transport needs? No, I don't think it will. I don't think everyone wants to live in the city. People want to live out in the suburbs. And by having public transport out to the suburbs, it kind of justifies living further away because making getting into the city easy and not having the need to be all crowded in and having no space. So public transport makes the outer suburbs more attractive to me, and I would not want to live in the middle of the city.
I do not believe that inner city high density living will decrease the need for public transport, as there are still going to be people who do not live in the inner city, and also those who do live in the inner city will still require public transport to move from one area of the city to another, or even outside of the city into the suburbs. So I do believe that there is always going to be a great need for public transport.
Well, as a non-constant user of public transport at the moment, I personally would like to see just the user pays for it, for the increased costs of running public transport networks. But realistically, it probably is better to increase taxes, as per person it'll be less you'll be less out of pocket. And really, if the prices did go up on fares, they'd probably dissuade people using public transport, because fares have gone up recently, and if I usually probably would have caught a bus, now I wouldn't, because I'm like $5 out of pocket just to get to the city and return. But if the taxes pay for it and fares stay down, I'd probably use it more often.
With managing the cost of public transport, I believe that it should come out of the government or local authorities' budget. So I would not support a user pays system of increasing costs of public transport. I think I would support more coming out of people's taxes, which comes out of the government's budget.
Well, by having large companies located outside the inner city is a good idea. Like, I know of some examples like the Coca-Cola factory at Richlands, I think it is, the main Big W distribution centres just outside of Brisbane, like all the major companies set up. That's a good idea, I think, because it kind of diverts more traffic and transport out of the city centre, which is, of course, you're going to need things based in the city, but as much as you can out in the outer suburbs would be great, as long as it doesn't hinder the beauty of the outer suburbs.
I don't believe that the relocation of industry to suburbs would increase the standard of living. I think it would decrease the standard of living. I think it's important to have areas set aside just for industry and just for commerce, so it does not impede on people's own personal lives and their health when living in their own suburb.
Well, if I personally had to change a model like for public and private transport, I would probably emphasise the integration of all forms of transport, cars, buses, trains, by improving roadways mainly, keeping fares to a minimum, because price is a major influence on as far as transport is concerned. And also inner city travel, I'd like to see a cheap inner city way of getting around without, a one zone pass for $1. I'd love to see that, because once you're in the city you can just keep going around and enjoy it for what it is.
I would design a future public and private transport model by ensuring that all the suburbs are linked up together, to ensure that people can get from one suburb to another suburb without having to necessarily go into one main location such as the city. I would also ensure that it was fully integrated by having buses and trains running to similar timetables, so that people do not have to wait at train stations after they've caught a bus, so they can get to their particular destination as quickly as possible.
Transport, in whatever form, is an important factor in the daily lives of young people.
Their priority is to move from one point to another quickly with minimum cost. Overriding this fact is a concern for safety, particularly at night. The changes in technology will happen, but only as fast as the public purse allows. Mixing the ingredients of social change and the perception of public transport may be more difficult. The issues of safety and security and the smooth integration of services appear to be a priority to youth. There is certainly a bright future for public transport when these matters are resolved.
Lisa certainly knows more about public transport. I'm just glad she got her licence back.
I think public transport now provides a number of benefits to young people. One is they're much more comfortable than they used to be in times past.
But the uni that I'm hoping to get into is all the way in Ipswich, so it'd be a real hassle. I'd have to get the bus and get the train, then get another bus from there to wherever it is that I'm going.
You can also do a lot of your schoolwork and university studies on public transports now, and I think in the near future technology may have a bigger impact on transportation, where you may be able to have live linkages to university while you're travelling.
I would be getting public transport because obviously you'd be drinking and your friends would be drinking, and so you wouldn't want to drink and drive. And if you go into the city, it's rather easy because there's transport is so easy to get there.
And I think the other thing is, if you're involved in going to nightclubs, parties, celebrations, that rather than relying on your friends or what you believe your skills to get home, and some young people believe that they're bulletproof, that you're better off taking public transport, which will get you home safer. And
we have to say to young people, do you care about the environment? Do you care about your city? Do you understand that cars cause not only pollution, but the most amazing accidents? If you compare the accident rate of any public transport system with any small number of cars, you will find that cars are the most dangerous weapons that we've got on suburban roads. So when you look at it carefully and in what I might call an adult way, the car presents many difficulties to society, but young people love them. So I'd like to say particularly to you people, we can plan as we are. We can build busways, cycleways, we can buy environmentally friendly buses. But in the end, we have to say to you, what is the important thing to you? Is it more important that you're comfortable or that you look smart, or that you consider the society? That you consider what's best for your city, for pollution, and that you make a sensible decision to use public transport more.